Let's bring in Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, who retired as director of the Defense Intelligence Agency last summer after holding almost every top military intel post. General Flynn, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks, Chris.
President Obama's policy in the Middle East, as we just heard, is complicated, but I want to lay out three main points. But let's put them up on the screen. We're fighting against Iranian-backed rebels in Yemen. We're fighting on the same side as Iranian-backed militias in Iran. And meanwhile, we're trying to negotiate a nuclear deal with Iran. But the Fox Brain Room, our research department, did this remarkable chart. Take a look at this to show what our dealings with Iran and Saudi Arabia right now really look like. For a closer look, because it bears some study, go to our Facebook page. But General Flynn, can you explain what the president's grand strategy is for the Middle East?
Yeah, so Chris, let me just start by just sort of stating two big points. One, where we are, and then what do we do about it? And I think where we are right now, we have almost a complete breakdown of order in the Middle East. A new Middle East is essentially struggling to be born. The second thing is we have Iran on the march. Iran is clearly on the march. As Jennifer Griffin's comments highlighted, both in Iraq, also Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, and other parts of the Middle East. We have a takeover of Islam by radical extremists, and I think that this is very dangerous, and it's both Shia and Sunni, and we can't forget that. We also have what I would call a real sort of a pushback by the Sunni governments and their lack of trust and their lack of respect for the United States. And I think that at the end of the day, we have just this incredible policy confusion, never mind what our strategy is to execute that policy.
But let me ask you about that, because it seems to be a patchwork of alliances where in some countries we're on the side of Saudi Arabia and the Sunnis. In other countries, like Iraq, we're on the side of the Shia and Iran. Can that work?
Yeah. So let me just start by saying, as an intelligence officer, intelligence has to be part of the calculus of every strategic level decision. And right now, my sense of where the policy is at is sort of, and I hate to say it like this, but it's almost a policy of willful ignorance. And to me, we have some major problems that we are dealing with. And here we are talking to Iran about a nuclear deal with this almost complete breakdown of order in the Middle East. One of the things that we have to keep in mind on Iran is also a country with ballistic missiles, cyber capabilities. They are also still a state sponsor of terrorism. And here we are dealing with them as though we're going to give them a carte blanche. I know it's going to be some number of years to have a nuclear capability. I mean, give me a break.
Well, let's talk about Iran, because the main point is clearly that Iran is on the march. And let's put up this map, because they've got growing power in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, and in Yemen. And this week, Saudi Arabia and Egypt finally decided that they were going to push back against Iran. And here's what the Saudi ambassador to the U.S. told me about Iran.
They want to dominate the region. Their officials have made no bones about publicly saying how proud they are to control 4 Arab capitals, Beirut, Damascus, Baghdad, and Sana'a. We will not tolerate any aggression against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia or our allies.
We will not tolerate any aggression. Question: how close are we to a sectarian regional war in the Middle East?
Yeah, we're not close. We're there. I mean, this is what's going on. And we have to face reality and not try to assume that we are going to be able to say something and hope that that's going to be, that our policy will be carried out because we say something. We have to face the reality that we are in right now. And that reality is there is a sectarian war. We also have to acknowledge, Chris, that both Iran and these radical Islamists, these extremists, we have to acknowledge that they do not like our way of life. In fact, they have stated that they want to see the destruction of our way of life. And I think that our leadership has to be really clear with the American public, not to scare the American public, but to inform them, to tell them exactly what it is that we are facing. I mean, that line and block chart you showed, that's if it was confusing to your audience, it's probably confusing to many in the government. And that's also part of the entire sort of policy and strategy that we are following. It is a state of confusion. And like I said, I can't say it any stronger. I almost feel like our policy is a policy of willful ignorance rather than facing the reality that we actually have right now.
You mentioned before, Iran has ballistic missiles. Pakistan could conceivably come in on the Saudi side, the Sunni side. First of all, where would Iran use ballistic missiles, and how dangerous could this potentially get, this sectarian warfare?
Yeah. The escalation of the challenges that we are looking at, first of all, we're not all going to suddenly wake up and peace is going to be breaking out in the Middle East. We are going to face increasing complexity in the Middle East, and the escalation of this conflict, this sectarian civil war that's ongoing between Iran and the various Sunni countries is going to be going on for some time. So the escalation of that and the application of other capabilities, with the potential of ballistic missiles, certainly cyber is already going on, and other terrorist acts on both sides. And from our interest, we have to make sure that we take care of those things, those allies, those partners that we have. And to me, it's a really important issue.
All right. You referenced the fact that we are just a couple of days away from the deadline, Tuesday night, midnight, for a framework nuclear deal between the U.S. and our allies on the one side and Iran on the other. I guess I got a couple of questions. First of all, does it make any sense to be negotiating this deal now, given Iran's march across the Middle East? And secondly, from what you hear about what's being negotiated on Iran's nuclear infrastructure, on the pace of lifting sanctions, is it a good deal or not?
Yeah. That Saudi ambassador that was on just a little while ago, only a couple of years ago, would have been blown up in a restaurant here in Washington, D.C., and other Americans that would have gone to that restaurant that night would have been killed had some good luck and some good law enforcement work not been accomplished. So that was all sponsored by Iran. Iran is a state sponsor of terrorism, according to our State Department. The guy that you showed, Qasem Soleimani, the head of the IRGC Quds Force, he is one of the leading individuals who is still designated as a terrorist.
So what are you saying about negotiating
We should stop right now and take a deep breath, step back, and look at everything that's going on instead of it's although we're in this nuclear deal and we see some light at the end of the tunnel that's going to walk us into a new level of nirvana. I don't know how else to call it. And in fact, that light is not a light that's going to expose us to some new world. That's a train that's heading in our direction. And I will tell you that we have to make sure that we step back and understand the full breadth and scale and scope of what is happening in the Middle East before we cut a deal with Iran. I think it's dangerous.
Pardon?
I think it's very dangerous.
The key, of course, if there is a deal, is would we be able to verify it? Would we be able to know what Iran is doing, that they're complying with the agreement? Last Sunday, I spoke with the CIA director, John Brennan, who expressed great confidence that between what our own intel and what the verification procedures will be, that we will know. Here's what he said.
I think we've gone to school on some of those developments over the last decade or so that we can now have a better plan and opportunity to verify some of the things that they are saying that they're going to do and not do.
Is Brennan right? Do you share his confidence that we would know what Iran is doing on its nuclear program? Forget the regional side of it. And what are the chances that Iran could or might be able to build a secret nuclear facility we know nothing about?
Yeah. And again, you showed a clip of General Austin not knowing what one of our closest allies in the region are doing, and that's the Saudis going in to do airstrikes in Yemen. So what makes us think that we are going to have, as much information as we're going to need to be able to verify this, whether or not the Iranians are developing a nuclear weapon or not? We have not had a lot of luck in that in the last 30 years, if not in the last couple of years. And I don't trust Iran. And I've seen a lot. What I know, Chris, about what I've seen over certainly the last 10 years, if not the last 30, they are not a nation to be trusted.
Final question. We have about less than a minute left. If you were still head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, as you were until just last summer, and you were advising the president right now, briefly, what would you say to him about this nuclear deal, and what would you say to him about the policy that we have now where we're on one side in one country and the other side in the other country?
I would say stop all engines on this nuclear deal. Take a step back, really take a deep dive look at everything going on in the Middle East. And it's not just the Middle East, it's all of North Africa, it's parts of West Africa, it's Central Asia. Chris, this is a growing threat. It has clear consequences on our national security. If it's not existential today, we should not wait for it to be existential. And in my belief, my experience, my judgment, we have to stop what we're doing and take a harder look at everything going on in the Middle East right now, because it's not going in the right direction.
General Flynn, thank you. Thanks for coming in today and helping to explain what's going on in the region, what's at stake. It's not a pretty picture. Thank you, sir. Please come back.
Sir.